Hey Casey, how did you do on the science final? Eric asked. I asked it. It was another easy test. Well, you get all the special education. The rest of us just get a general education. You have such an advantage. Are you kidding me? We both get the same education. You just always pick the easy electives. You don't challenge yourself. I'm going to be an engineer and work down in the machine shops for the rest of my life. Most of what we're being taught doesn't even apply to me. Sure it does, but don't let it frustrate you. You are smart where it counts. I'm sure of that. Thanks. Hey, do you know why Jake wasn't in school today? No. He's probably sick. Right. Oh, did you hear James freaking out again? I heard him screaming down the hall. Notice how he does that every time there is a science test? Yeah, why is that? Ever since Mr. McCullum told us about asteroids, he worries we're going to get hit by one. He thinks we're never going to reach our destination, wherever that is. Poor kid. Poor kid. You know he could be right, and if that does happen, I hope we all die quickly. Honestly, I'm not concerned either way, and I don't plan to let it ruin my life. According to McCullum, space is so big and vast that the chances of that happening are too small to calculate, although he shouldn't have said anything. I hope James grows out of it. Me too. Casey stared at Eric. You didn't flunk the test, did you? No, I got a C, again. I guess that isn't too bad. That was the hardest test I've ever taken. I expect when I get home, I'm going to get into a lengthy argument with Mom. So, I probably won't be going up top tonight. Oh please. You always say that. After all the years I've known you and your family, she has never gotten mad at you because of your grades. Aren't you too old to use your mother as an excuse? Do you want me to tell her you're saying such things? If you have other plans, say so. Well, chili. Ah, you like chili, and prefer to go to her compartment, right? Maybe. Right. Go ahead. You're free to do whatever you want. We're getting too old to depend so much on one another. We can hang out another time when your hormones recover. Have fun, talk to ya later. You're my best friend, Casey. I'll see you tomorrow at school. Okay. That was true, Casey had lots of friends, but Eric and Jake were his two best friends. The three grew up together and met the first day of school when they were just 4 years old. There was a strong bond among the three, until recently, when Eric fell for chili, and Jake met Annika. Although that didn't bother Casey since such things were the natural progression of life, and despite their friendship, he was quite independent and enjoyed doing things by himself. They said goodbye and went their separate ways. Casey boarded the tram to go home. His home compartment was a 10-minute ride from school. He walked in as his mother was making dinner. Your father will be home late, so it's just you and me for dinner. Since tonight is meat night, I made steak and fries just for you. Come sit and eat. Mom, I'm going up top after dinner. For Casey, there was not much else to do during the evening. The only real entertainment for young people on board the craft was gathering at the park with friends or sitting at home reading manuals about the different professional fields that 99% of the students were preparing for. Casey was a top student, although he didn't care about fanfare or awards. He was too independent to care about those things. Often, he worked hard to finish his assignments so he could sit in class and dream about his next adventure up top. Okay, I figured as much. Honorable are Eric and Jake going with you? No. Eric is going to Chili's, and Jake didn't come to school today. I think he's sick. Eric is going to Chili's? Yes. She has her fingers up his nose and is leading him around like a pet. He knows she's pretty and a good catch, supposing she wants to catch him, which surprises me because she's 10 times smarter than he is, but I like her, and she's good for him. So, we won't be hanging out as much. I'm sure, before too long, he'll marry her and apply for a child. Casey, what are you thinking? He's too young to get married, you too, young man. Mom, Eric and Chili are 18 years old, almost 19. Others are getting married at 19, so they can apply for children before they turn 25. Well, don't grow up too fast. There's no hurry to become an adult. He turned 19 a week earlier and was finishing his last year of school before he and his friends entered their apprenticeships. Casey was 6'2", with sun-bleached sandy blonde hair and quite athletic. He was one of the few who had the silver blue eyes. His dark almond skin, tanned from all the time he spent in the artificial sunlight up top, practically caused them to glow. He was always kind, unassuming, and almost too polite. He was never afraid of anything and always excited about any new adventure, which took him to places most others would not go. In fact, he was often accused of being too adventurous. Turning to his mother, he confessed, "I have no intention of becoming an adult. I almost wish I were a kid again so I could spend more time exploring up top." They laughed and talked about what an odd couple Eric and Chili would make, but she liked him, and he liked her. Casey, unlike his friends, had no intention of giving up his life to get involved in a relationship. It would only distract from those things he loved to do. The Ark, for being a spacecraft, was designed like a small world. Despite its size, Casey always found new and exciting places to explore. He left his compartment and rode the tram for 30 minutes before he got off. Stairways led to the surface every mile, and most of the time, they were unused. This time he traveled to a new set of stairs. 2 weeks earlier, he determined he would make his way to every set of staircases until he exited them all. Today he traveled 10 miles to this current hatch. After opening the hatch, he emerged into the sunlight and empty fields as if he had the place to himself. He wished he was a land or animal keeper so he could spend more time in the forest and the fields. Most inhabitants never came up top. Except for the keepers, no one had a reason to. Casey couldn't imagine spending his whole life in the lower decks as most others did. His father was an engineer, repair welder, who worked and spent most of his time in one of the 200 machine shops down on the 3rd level, and most children followed in their parents' footsteps. If Casey was an ordinary citizen, he would become an engineer, welder, just like his dad, but because he had blue eyes, he would follow a different path. Only the ancients had blue eyes. Because of that, he would be a student until he turned 20, a professor until he turned 40, and a historian until he turned 60. At age 60, he would become an elder. Elders were the most knowledgeable citizens on the ship. They were also the governing officials on board. It was the blue-eyed ancient's responsibility to know about life, purpose, and mechanics of the Ark. He was prepared to spend the rest of his life researching, learning about society as well as how it and the Ark worked together to sustain life until they arrived at their destination. The ship and its passengers have already been traveling for 150 generations at light speed. No one, not even the ancients, knew how long or how far it was until they reached their new planet. That was because 58 years into the expedition, there was a fire in the Central Archives compartment that destroyed all the original books and manuals, including all the information related to the destination planet and its distance from Earth. That same fire killed all the elders. They were holding a meeting at the time and became trapped in the archive compartment. No one could save them. So, not only did all the elders die, the ship lost all of its history, purpose, and instruction manuals. More importantly, the elders were the only ones who knew the secrets of the Ark, and sadly, all that knowledge died with them. It took 10 years before the next generation replaced them, but the secrets remained unknown to this day. That fire nearly ended the expedition in disaster. Having blue eyes was rare, with only 12 travelers out of every generation having them. There were 4 generations, and a generation was 20 years. So there were 48 citizens with blue eyes. All the other citizens on board had brown or green eyes. A citizen obtained blue eyes through vaccination. At birth, every newborn is given a general vaccination, but every 20 years, they gave 12 random vaccinations that turned the child's eyes blue. Those children who received those vaccinations followed a different path in life, one which led them to the life of an ancient. If a blue-eyed citizen died before age 60, a person of the same age, generally a librarian, was selected to receive a new vaccination containing the blue-eyed gene. Not one ancient has died unexpectedly since the first group of elders died in the fire. Casey glanced at the sun, which blinded him. He stopped, closed his eyes, and pulled his protective glasses from his shirt pocket. The glasses would protect his eyes until he acclimated to the sunlight. Crop and animal keepers were the only ones used to the bright light. Although he spent so much time on top, he could remove the glasses after an hour. He thought about his father again and how dull his life would be if he followed in his footsteps. It was unimaginable how so many people lived their whole lives below. Casey had an unusual fascination with the surface, especially for a blue-eyed ancient, but even the other ancients spent most of their time in the artificial constructs below. They had their artificial sunlight, and night skies, but he was always excited about coming up top. Sometimes, his friends Eric and Jake joined him, but most of the time, he traveled by himself. He particularly liked the forest, the keeps, and the animals, especially the horses. He knew several of the keepers, and they often invited him in for a meal. As his eyes acclimated, he lifted his head and saw the slight turning of the wheel. That's what everyone called the ark. Earth sent the wheel, and other arks like it, into space because the Earth's core was cooling, and the Earth was dying. So, they built 1,000 arks and sent them out in every direction, hoping to find new worlds to inhabit. Each one was designed to hold a population of 72,000 humans and sustain them for as long as necessary to reach their destination. The ark managed water, air, animal life, and living space for as long as it took to find a new home. Again, it was the ancients' responsibility to keep everyone alive and healthy. In order to sustain life and prevent overpopulation aboard the ark, they gave everyone, in each vaccination, a gene that ended their life at precisely age 81. Although sad, it was necessary for the population to survive. Death was painless and happened when the old person went to sleep on their 81st birthday. Every family member would gather around on that day to say goodbye to their loved one. As he walked, Casey saw the distant interior landmass rise up like mountains before him. Sometimes the whole interior landmass was visible, looking like a thin green line cutting through the sky above him. With a pair of good binoculars, he could make out the keeps overhead. They looked like dots against the green surface, but he could see them. The arcs were designed like a giant bicycle tire with a flat interior landmass, with several levels of compartments circling the whole outside. The ground appeared to flatten out as he traveled along. He could barely tell because gravity was down, no matter where you stood. The inner circumference was 60 miles, and the landmass was 3 miles wide. There was a small artificial sun placed in the center and off to one side with large tubes, 120 of them, set 1/2 mile apart, like spokes leading from the ground to the sun. The sun was surrounded by a magnetic field that looked like a large clear globe. That field did not allow its energy to escape. So, unless it was damaged, it could last up to 10,000 years. That's what he was taught in school. The field around the sun regulated the heat and kept it at a constant 75 degrees on the surface during the day and 65 degrees during the night. Several of the tubes were used to purify water and air, sucking both to an area around the sun, expelling it, and burning off all the impurities. Afterward, the recycled elements were sent back to the ship. Sometimes the area around the sun would create clouds from the moisture of the water vapor being released, causing great lightning storms. The storms converted the refuse elements into biological fertilizer for the whole inside land mass. That happened every Thursday, and it was the most beautiful day to be up top. It was daytime for 18 hours up top, and night for 6. The artificial sun seemed to go out every 18 hours. For the next 6, it looked like an enormous full moon. The global field shielded the sun for those 6 hours. That shield was not designed to block out the sun completely, but just darken it enough to provide shade for the surface to cool. The moonlight was beautiful, and Casey often stayed through the night. The night proved very mysterious, with all the shadows hiding in the forest and the fields, both outlined with golden light. The ark didn't have an actual sky. Instead, it had a solid force field that turned blue during the day, from reflecting the sun. Every tube reflected the same color blue. Casey had to focus to see them against the artificial sky. At night everything was black except for the orange hue generated by the field blocking the sun. There were no seasons on board Wheel. Casey and the other young people learned of them only in the school books. Those books were mandatory reading and explained how each one differed. The seasons on board Wheel were stuck between spring and summer. It was designed that way to allow for 2 harvests per year. When one crop was complete, the next was already planted. Different sections were planted at different times so as not to overburden the soil. In the beginning, the builders thought about adding compartments that represented the 4 different seasons but felt other things were more important to the travelers' survival. Consequently, they made sure the school curriculum included books and lessons about them. One popular book was a book of poems about autumn. It was written by a man named Jeff Flake, who lived on the earth long ago. The homeless wind marches down lonely empty streets, while trees toss leaves like confetti, as the summer of our youth passes by. The continuous parade of life, left in heaps of decaying beauty, finding its mortality in an August sun, and its deathbed beneath sheets of winter. A funeral procession impending, led by a vagabond mood that never returns, for a reminder of years past and gone. To the last tune of a summer breeze, seasons end and life withdraws from the music of a marching band. Turning the corner at the end of the street, leaving hushed silent contemplation. Fall seemed like such a lonely time, according to Mr. Flake, and a poem to be read on one's 81st birthday. Despite the allegation of being a deathbed recital, the poem actually led Casey, being young, to dream about winter, snow, and a sport called snowboarding. He, Eric, and Jake often talked about how they would go snowboarding when, and if, they got to their new home. Everyone on board Wheel talked about their future home and how they would do one thing or another. It was dinner talk every night, and the first thing one thought of when getting out of bed in the morning. If anything could be said of the travelers, except for those like James, they never gave up hope, and it had been that way from the very beginning. Until then, the builders provided for all the Wheel's needs, including a massive river that flowed below the compartments. The river was in constant motion as the Wheel spun slowly. It contained enough water for everyone to use as much as they needed, including the keepers up top. The citizens were always encouraged to use as much water as they wanted, hoping on Thursday there would be enough impurities in the atmosphere to create a right amount of biochemical fertilizer. The Wheel was a closed system where nothing went to waste. Sad, but necessary. The lifespan was from birth to 81, and with no crime, no pardon, the death sentence is passed. When an elderly person died, their bodies were carried and inserted into individual tubes and disintegrated. They did the same with human and animal waste. So, again, the population recycled everything, including themselves. Casey was too busy thinking about his next adventure to concern himself with death. He, like all those his age, thought it would never overcome him. He'd live forever, immortal, in his quests, until the ship reached its destination, and then he would start all over. The backside of the ship ended at a wall, and he'd make his way back and place his hand on it to feel the vibration of the ship as it moved through space. He knew deep within himself that the Ark was nearing the new home world. It was like something would change the next moment and he would feel it as he laid his hand on the wall. Immediately afterward, excitement and proclamations would flow throughout the Ark, "We're home." The builders painted the wall sky blue, and it looked like an actual sky if one really knew what a sky looked like, but it made the Ark look much bigger than it was. Just inside the wall was a 1.5 mile wide dense ancient forest, planted and left to itself for almost 3,000 years. Casey, being one of the few who liked to explore, found it as mysterious as any fantasy novel he had ever read. Although Casey knew every tree within 2 miles of his living compartment, the rest he had yet to explore, and he planned to do so before he died. In some areas, The trees were so thick he could not see the artificial sun, just small threads of light that appeared to be hanging down through their limbs. He found those places eerie and loved every minute he spent in the darkness. Other places, the underbrush was so thick he had to carry a machete to make pathways. He read in books how the forest should be full of so many kinds of wildlife. Sometimes, he would hear the sound of an animal moving through the brush, but it was always so thick he never saw what it was, which only added to the mysterious feelings the forest gave him. Like the river below the decks, a broad creek flowed next to the wall for the whole circumference of the wheel. About every mile was a meadow with a lake in the middle where the creek flowed in one end and out the other. Casey, Jake, and Eric spent many Saturdays swimming in the small lakes. Between the creek and the wall were rocky areas and cliffs. Again, Casey and his two friends were among the only people who ventured that deep into the forest. Even the keepers were too busy to explore them. Casey thought it was strange that the 12 elders lacked interest or an in-depth knowledge of the forest. Someday, he hoped to change their understanding. A wide path ran between the forest and the keeps, circling the whole ship. It was grassy and a mile wide. Foliators kept it neatly trimmed, making for a delightful stroll. He couldn't imagine anyone not wanting to be where he was at the moment. It gave him a powerful sensation. He must have walked 5 miles when he came upon a family of animal keepers. Keepers raised all the meat and produce for the population. These keepers were cattle keepers. That excited Casey because they had horses. "Good day. How are you?" A tall, rugged-looking man, whose face was tan and leathery, said, "We're all well, son, and you?" Casey could tell the man earned his rugged look from hard work. He was wearing overalls, a breezer hat, and looked like another adventurer. A woman standing next to him was very pretty. She was wearing a white dress and a big white bonnet, which highlighted her black skin and flowing hair. Both of them looked as if they were in their late 30s. The couple standing next to them were in their late 50s or early 60s. The older man looked similar to the other younger man, and the older woman was shorter than the rest. She was wearing a flower dress and a similar bonnet to the younger woman. They were out of place. Casey thought it was odd that they were standing out in the middle of the path. Casey answered, "I'm good. I'm making my way around the whole of the surface, exploring." The younger man said, "Well, an explorer, eh? You must be a blue-eyed explorer, no doubt." "Yes, I am, sir." He walked up to Casey for a closer look. "You are? Well, there aren't many of you. Is there anything we can do for you?" "Nah. As I said, I'm just working my way around the surface. I'm trying to explore the whole circumference. Once I'm done, I plan to do it again, but I plan to travel through the forests next time. I'm certain no one has done it yet." "Right, I haven't heard of anyone doing so in a long time, but we don't get many people, other than keepers, coming up top. I have only seen a couple of blue eyes up here, which makes you an unusual sight. Let me introduce myself. I am Casey Hill. I live about 15 miles in that direction." He pointed back the way he came. "Nice to meet you, Casey. I'm Lucas Freeman. This is my wife, May, and these are my parents, Addis and Katrine Freeman. We live 3 miles in the opposite direction. You're the same age as our son, Handel, and our daughter Corina." "Handel? What an unusual name." May answered, "Yes, it is. His birth name was Randall, but he couldn't pronounce it. He always said Handel instead. So, we kept the name." Lucas interrupted, "In fact, both are in the forest as we speak. We're standing here waiting for their return. They went chasing after 2 animals we'd never seen before." "How so?" "They had bare skin like a sheared sheep but ran like a horse. Also, they made the strangest sound. They killed one of my calves." He stepped away and pointed to his side, where a young calf lay dead, and said, "Handel and Corina went into the forest to find the creatures that did this. I've never seen them before. They've been gone over 2 hours. Have you ever seen animals like those before? As an ancient, do you know about them?" "No, animals are a food source for humans, not other animals." May, who was a veterinarian, said, "We'll see. I'm not so sure those animals did this. Until we know what they are, we can't be sure of that. It looks more like a deformity to me, but that's not as exciting as wild animals running around killing things." Casey smiled and said, "I need to be on my way. I would like to get in another hour walking before I return home. It was nice to meet you, and perhaps we will meet again." "Good day to you, young man." Casey headed for the forest. He wanted to walk closer to catch sight of those animals they told him about. After another hour, he returned home, finding nothing new or exciting running out of the forest. He retired and turned his nightlight on, which turned his dome-shaped bedroom into a mural of space. He lay dreaming of the animals the keeper told him about, and it fascinated him. Usually, before he fell asleep, he daydreamed of space outside the wheel, wishing the sky field didn't block it out, but he knew if the field quit working, everyone would be dead in minutes. Casey fell asleep after an hour of contemplating the life lying before him. Sometimes, he feared the responsibility that lay ahead. The next day at school, he told Jake and Eric about his adventure the previous night, and the animals the keeper told him about. They didn't seem interested. Casey knew Eric and Chili would become a couple, and his friend Jake liked Annika but was too shy to say anything, even though she approached him every day. She would probably have to inform him of her intentions, and at which time he would run away. She was smart, pretty, and after him. Casey had nothing, no one, other than his adventures, but he was content with that. Besides, there were only 2 weeks left of the school year, and this was their last year of school before his friends would enter their apprenticeships. Jake's father was an engineer, and Eric's was in warehousing. Even though the three would follow different life paths, it was common for young people to stay friends after school, despite the life changes brought about by careers and families. Casey will move to the library and study under the professors beginning the first quarter of next year. The library was one of the most prominent constructs on board. It contained all the history that survived the fire and the personal diaries of everyone who ever lived on board. It included all the remaining important text manuals for government, society, and operation of the wheel. He was excited about attending,